The US has warned Israel it must improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or face potential cuts and restrictions in military aid. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd wrote to Israeli officials on Sunday expressing their concern. The letter was meant to be private. Alan Fisher reports.
Aid shipments into Gaza have been shrinking over the last few months, and in the first 2 weeks of October, no aid has arrived at all. People are becoming increasingly desperate. The UN has warned 2.2 million people are in urgent need of basic help. And just last week, the US told the UN Security Council that Israel needs to address urgently catastrophic conditions in the Gaza Strip and stop intensifying suffering by limiting aid deliveries. Now, two top US officials, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Lloyd, the Defense Secretary, have written to the Israelis outlining specific steps that must be taken inside the next 30 days. These include allowing a minimum of 350 trucks a day to enter Gaza, creating pauses in the fighting to allow aid delivery, and rescinding evacuation orders for civilians where there is no operational need. Failure to take urgent action could lead to US military aid being blocked.
What we have seen over the past few months is that the level of humanitarian assistance has not been sustained. In fact, it has fallen by over 50% from where it was at its peak. So the Secretary, along with Secretary Austin, thought it was appropriate to make clear to the government of Israel that there are changes that they need to make again to see that the level of assistance making it into Gaza comes back up from the very, very low levels that it is at today.
This is the strongest ultimatum yet that Washington has sent the Israelis. There are clear goals and a transparent timeline, but it doesn't mean that there's a long-term change in the US attitude to the way the Israelis are prosecuting the war in Gaza. The White House says the letter is in keeping with communications the US has had with Israel throughout the conflict. From the Pentagon, a warning the US is serious, having already blocked one shipment to Israel.
We continue to have frank conversations with them. As you know, we do still have that one shipment of the 2,000-pound bombs currently still paused.
Critics say Israel has broken US and international law repeatedly, but the Biden administration has failed repeatedly to hold it to account. But it's clear Blinken and Austin believe Israel is responsible for the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza, which is putting millions at risk. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, at the State Department.
Menachem Klein is a professor of political science at Bar-Ilan University, and he's joining us from West Jerusalem. Mr. Klein, thank you very much for your time. Will Israel heed this letter, given its disregard for what the US has asked it to do over the past year?
Israel and the United States have joint strategic goals, but they debate on tactics and stages. And what we hear and see in the last 48 hours is a debate regarding tactics and some special operations or certain operations that Israel did in Gaza Strip and violate human rights and hurts civilians. The United States are very uncomfortable with that and thinks that Israel is an unreliable partner. But each of them do not come up with the day after plan. So if we try to find out, is there an exit door to end the operation in Gaza, to the war in Gaza? There is no exit door, and nor there is a wall that within it there is an exit door. So there is no discourse, no negotiation, no discussion between the two sides about when and under which preconditions Israel ends the war.
And again, the US is asking, you're saying that they both agree on their strategic goals. The US says it supports Israel's goal of destroying defeating Hamas, even though officials from both governments often say that that's not entirely possible. But if we come back to this letter and the US saying that there might be repercussions for Israel in terms of the great financial military aid that the US gives Israel if Israel doesn't abide by international humanitarian law and allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza, do you think that Israel is going to pay any attention to this?
I hope so that Israel will pay attention. Israel has a shortage in war equipments. Israel needs the United States in order to continue killing and destroying Gaza Strip and South Lebanon. Israel cannot defend itself against Iranian missiles without the United States. So Israel must take the United States administration attitude into consideration. How far Israel will take it into consideration, I don't think it will obey, it will follow fully what the United States wants, because the atmosphere in the Israeli public and in this coalition, the coalition of Jewish supremacy, is to destroy the Palestinian national movement, to destroy the identity of the Palestinians and its institutions, and still Israel seeks for the total victory in Gaza Strip, which is unachievable, and Israel thinks that it can achieve it. It's a wrong strategy. But as long as these people, the general staff, the Minister of Defense and the Prime Minister lead Israel, this wrong strategy will continue.
And how much of a problem is it, Mr. Klein, that it's not just the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense that employ this strategy? There seems to be any lack of real opposition to it within the political opposition in Israel. There's no alternative being presented.
Unfortunately, you are fully right. We don't have an opposition. We don't have an opposition that propose an alternative political track and believes in a political track, but rather the opposition believes in more force and more war and more bombardment and more occupation. That's our tragedy. And even what is called the opposition or the leftist center opposition, I call them the Zionist militarism. They think militaristically. They think along army and force use. That's our tragedy. They don't think politically, and they don't come up with a political program. The opposition leaders are afraid of their constituency, and they don't lead their constituencies. They follow, they follow their people. That's the problem. And here we have 50 shades of right wing and militarism.
Mr. Klein, thank you so much for your analysis. We really appreciate it. Menachem Klein, live in West Jerusalem.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.